harms B carelessly and B suffers as a result of it, B may bring a claim against A in the tort of negligence. There are three elements of tort of negligence: duty, breach, and damage. In this video, we will look at how the duty of care is established. The question to ask ourselves is, does the defendant owe a duty of care to the claimant? The tort of negligence was set up in the landmark case of Donoghue versus Stevenson. Here, it was decided that the manufacturer of the bottle owed a duty of care to Mrs Donoghue. It was established by Lord Atkin that one must take reasonable care to avoid acts or omissions which one can reasonably foresee would be likely to injure one's neighbour. Here, the test of foreseeability is an objective one, which means what a reasonable person would be expected to foresee. The ginger beer manufacturer did not know Mrs Donoghue would be drinking his product, only that someone would. This principle is known as the neighbour principle. In Home Office versus Dorset Yard, it was found that the principle would apply to all situations except in those where there is a reason it should not apply. In Annes versus Merton London Borough Council, the principle was clarified in two-stage test. Question 1. Is there a relationship of proximity between the defendant and the claimant? In other words, could the defendant reasonably be expected to foresee a risk of harm to the claimant? Question 2. Are there any policy reasons that end the duty of care or restrict it? Hence, the duty shall be imposed unless there are any factors which limit the duty. Button Murphy versus Brentwood District Council, Annes versus Merton was overruled. In Capero versus Dickman, a new strategy was put forward, which is the current law of duty of care. Now, the duty of care consists of foreseeability, proximity, the fair and just and reasonable rule. Therefore, the first requirement is the damage must be reasonably foreseeable. This is an objective test, merely whether it was foreseeable that someone might come into the sphere of harm of these actions. In Haley versus London Electricity Board, duty was extended to all persons reasonably expected to walk along, including blind men. Considering the number of blind people who lived in London, it was foreseeable that a blind person might be at risk of falling in. The requirement is that there must be proximity in the relationship between the defendant and the claimant. They have to know each other. It signifies that the defendant could reasonably be expected to foresee that his actions could cause damage to the claimant. In the case of Goodwill versus British Pregnancy Advisory Service, doctor performed a vasectomy and failed to warn about the small risk of spontaneous reversal. It resulted in pregnancy. There was not a relationship of proximity between the advisory service and the pregnant woman. Hence, the claim failed. The requirement is it must be fair, just and reasonable for the court to impose a duty of care. In this stage, the courts take into account any policy reasons against the claim. In the case of Mark Rich versus Marine Bishop, it was held that it would be unfair, unjust, and unreasonable to place a duty, a classification society, as against a ship owner, since it might lead to surveyors refusing to survey high-risk ships. The requirements of Capero often overlap, as Lord Oliver said in the Capero test. They are facets of the same thing. When these three conditions are fulfilled, the duty of care is imposed.